Hi, this is Dave Clark. In the first part of this video series, we had discussed one method to run SQL statements against multiple databases within the same query window, and that was by using the system procedure SPMS for each DB. In that video, we also alluded to the fact that we would be setting up registered servers as another way to run query against multiple databases from the same query window. So in this video, let's go over the registered server setup. To access the registered servers, you can do it a few ways. We'll access it from view and then registered servers. You notice there's also the hotkey for that. And then we'll have the, we're going to create these as database engines. We're not going to create registered servers for like integration services or something. So we'll choose the local server groups. We'll right click there and choose new server group. And I'll just name this something like development servers. And that's all we have is the name and the description. We hit OK, and we've got our group folder set up. And then you can create subfolders within the folder. So if I just created like a folder that said my servers, and then within that I could have development servers, and then a folder for QA servers, etc. So here we're just going to have the one, and we will now create, we'll register a server in here. So my server name is going to be Clark PC demo, and you can browse for these as well. And that's actually not what it is. Well, I probably should just browse for it. There we go. And then because the technique we're showing here is that we're going to actually make each of these not so much a server registration, but it's actually going to be a specific database that we want to connect to. I like to prefix these with like S for server and then DB for database, and I'm going to connect to one called SQL resources. Well, actually that's on a different server, excuse me. On here we'll connect to demo test DB. And then you can put your description in here. And then for connection properties, now default will be the default for whatever the login is that's used. So most logins, the default by best practices is set to go to master. That way, if you set it to go to a particular database and that database is either removed or has its name changed, then that account will no longer be able to log in successfully. So that's why it'll just go to default. And that's why it's like a server registration, because usually you're connecting to master. You can run like health checks and policies and things like that against this server connections. So we're actually just going to browse here. And it says browse server, so if you're not browsing for a server, you're browsing the server. So I'm going to pick demo test DB. Let me just make sure that's what I called it, demo test DB, right? It doesn't matter, I just want to make sure that I got the name right. And just while we're in here real quick, here's a nice thing you can do is to use custom colors. We'll just pick one for this, like this purple one, and I'll show you how that comes into play in a moment. We'll test the connection, make sure I set it up okay, and then we'll save that registration. And then I will create another one, new server registration. And this is going to be a database on a different server. So I'm going to select my main instance, my default instance, and on this one I'm going to connect to that server, and my database is going to be the SQL resources. And sorry, I have a little issues with my cursor today. Okay, and here I'm going to select SQL resources, test that, test was successful, save. So now we have these two server registrations, but when we connect, we're going to connect to those databases, demo, test DB, and SQL resources. So now how we can access this, and here's something that's pretty neat too. There's a couple things you can do in here, but notice in Object Explorer I don't have any connections currently. now you could right click on the development servers in your registered servers section, select Object Explorer, and then it takes you to Object Explorer and immediately connects to both of those based on the credentials. And the credentials could be different. Like one of these, maybe I use Windows Auth, and another I use a specific SQL login. So that's nice that you can set that up. All right. Okay, so that was the setup of it. And now let's go ahead and do our query. So we just right click and choose new query. And you might be thinking, well, wait a minute, this new query, how's it going to work? Because there's two databases in this group. I'm not right clicking on one of these and choosing new query. I'm actually right clicking on the group. When I choose new query, I get a window. The first thing you might notice is that the database is set to multiple. And multiple isn't an option, you know, in your normal list, but that's how it denotes that this query is going to be run against multiple databases. So down here you see we're connected to the group development servers, and which is going to run against multiple databases, and it tells us that actually 2 of 2. I think, is that the servers or is that the, yeah, that's just the window. 1 of 1, 2 of 2. Or maybe that's the count. I actually hadn't noticed that before. Easiest way to check, let's just do a new query. Yeah, so 2 of 2. So that's telling us how many servers we're actually connected to. So what I'm going to do is select customer ID from customer. This is a table that I happen to have on both instances, or both of these databases. Actually, I just want to show you something real quick. This table has customer ID, customer name, customer ranking, and then in our SQL resources, we've got the columns customer ID, customer name, customer ranking, and then extra column. We'll just keep that in mind for a moment. So we'll go ahead and run the select customer ID from the customer table, execute, and notice we get our results back. Now the thing that you might notice about this is that we get one result set back, whereas when we ran the system procedure SPMS for each DB, we got a result set for each database that it was run against. So it was totally independent. So if if customer, as long as the table and the columns that we were querying existed, our queries that we got back, the column customer ID, for example, it could be an integer on in the table on one database and a string, you know, varchar or something in the table on another database, and that would run successfully because each of those was brought back in its own result set. They were running basically in separate batches. But here it unions the results together. So, and that's why it has this extra column here called server name. So it's telling you the server name, which since we set it up to be descriptive with the server and database, that'll actually show us that this is running against the SQL resources database on that particular server, and this is run against the demo testDB database. Now, this is what I wanted to show you. If we change this to be the select star, then we're confronted with the error message. Error has occurred while executing the batch. Error message is the result set could not be merged because, no, sorry, let me just go to the end. Because the result schema did not match the schema from the first responding server. And notice we did get results for the first server that it hit, but then when it went to the next server, it didn't have the same columns. And the reason that doesn't work is if you know about unions, you have to have the same number of columns, and each column has to be of the same data type. So this would work great if our databases were basically the same. Like if we created an application and it's got all these tables in database A and the same application accesses database B, they're basically the same, then this would work for us. But if it's two totally different things, like maybe one's like a OLTP database and the other might be a data warehouse, our table structures might be different. So that's just some caveat to be aware of there. Just real quick, also one thing I wanted to mention was if you are using the registered servers and right click and choose new query, notice this is where that custom color that we set comes into play, is that we'll know that this purple is indicating for us maybe, you know, a development server or something like that. See, a lot of people set up like development to be red and or excuse me, production to be red and maybe development to be something else, and the QA ones to be green. And so yeah, that's just something that's pretty neat. But remember, when you do it for the group, it can't, like, your colors may be different for each server connection, so it just gives you this default pink here. Even if all of the registrations had the same color, it still wouldn't show that because you're running against multiple. Okay, so probably talked on long enough about this. The main purpose of the registered servers isn't to be database specific. It really is to do that policy-based management type things and maintenance and health checks and whatnot. But I just thought this was another way that you could set it up, because there's no limitation on these groups. I mean, you could create a group where you're connecting to the master database and you do your policy-based management and everything from there. And you can also just have another group for your test environment where you set up to run test queries against, and you have, you know, maybe 10 or 12 databases in there, and just fire it away, and you can compare the results of the data from the different databases. Again, the biggest difference in this one is, oh, where did my query go? The biggest difference in this one is the fact that all the results are in one result set union together, and you have to rely on this server name column to distinguish the difference. So if you're looking at one particular record and you want to see the differences in a database, it's helpful. If you're looking at like thousands, then it may be best to do the SP/MS for each DB, where you can get a different result set for each. All right, I hope you found this video tutorial useful, and I hope you all have a great day. Thank you.